Welding, cutting, and brazing program. General policy. It is a policy of Plaas Incorporated that its employees follow safe work practices when performing welding, oxyacetylene cutting, and brazing hot work. Operations in the facility and, if necessary, at remote locations. This policy outlines the safe work procedures which shall be followed to control and minimize hot work hazards. General hot work safety precautions. The following safety practices shall be followed. The supervisor is responsible to ensure that safe cutting and welding procedures are followed at all times. Hot work operations shall be permitted after an inspection is performed by the supervisor and the welder to ensure that all safety precautions have been completed. A first aid kit shall be made available on the construction site at all times. Hot work on the lead-based materials, zinc, cadmium, mercury, stainless steel, or beryllium, shall have proper ventilation in place, or the employees engaged in the operations shall have appropriate fume respirators provided. Hot work within confined space is regulated under the company Confined Space Entry Program. Oxygen and acetylene cylinders shall be capped, secured, stored upright, and physically separated by 20 feet or a non-combustible partition during storage. Hot work equipment shall be inspected daily and maintained in operational condition. Equipment defects shall be reported to the foreman supervisor. All repairs shall be made only by qualified personnel. Training. All personnel engaged in hot work operations shall be trained in the use of fire extinguishing equipment, qualified and judged competent for such work by an evaluation conducted by the supervisor. Cutters, welders, and their supervisors shall be trained in the safe operations of their equipment and safe hot work processes. All employees designated by Plaas Incorporated to operate arc welding equipment shall be qualified to operate such equipment and trained in accordance with the following: operations and maintenance of welding machines, machine hookup, grounding of the welding machine frame, checking for leaks of cooling water, shielding gas, or engine fuel, location of switches including shutdown switch, manufacturer's instructions, proper use of electrode holders, protection from electrical shock, maintenance of the welding machine, inspection and joining of cables, environmental conditions. Fire hazards. The following precautions should be taken to minimize the risk of fire during and after hot work operations. All movable fire hazards, combustibles, flammables, and excessive dust, oils, shall be removed within 35 feet of the work operation. A fire watch shall be established in locations where other than a minor fire might develop, such as non-movable combustible materials closer than 35 feet to the point of operation. Easily ignited combustibles that may be affected that are 35 feet or more from the point of operation. Wall or floor openings within 35 feet that may expose combustibles in adjoining areas above or below the work area. Combustible materials located on the opposite side of metal partitions, ceilings, or roofs. Personnel assigned as fire watch shall have a Class ABC fire extinguisher readily accessible. The fire watch shall be maintained during and for at least 30 minutes after completion of the hot work. If materials that could readily ignite cannot be removed from the area, then guards shall be used to confine any heat, sparks, or slag and to protect the immovable fire hazards. Combustible material. Whenever there are floor openings or cracks in the flooring that cannot be closed, precautions shall be taken so that no readily combustible materials on the floor below will be exposed to sparks which might drop through the floor. The same precautions shall be observed with regard to cracks or holes in walls, open doorways, and open or broken windows. Combustible walls, where cutting or welding is done near walls, partitions, ceilings, or roofs of combustible construction, fire-resistant shields or guards shall be provided to prevent ignition. Non-combustible walls. If welding is to be done on a metal wall, partition, ceiling, or roof, precautions shall be taken to prevent ignition of combustibles on the other side due to condition or radiation, preferably by relocating combustibles. Where combustibles are not relocated, a fire watch on the opposite side from the work shall be provided. Combustible cover. Welding shall not be attempted on a metal partition, wall, ceiling, or roof having a combustible covering, nor on walls or partitions of combustible sandwich-type panel construction. Pipes. Cutting or welding on pipes or other metal in contact with combustible walls, partitions, ceilings, or roofs shall not be undertaken if the work is close enough to cause ignition by conduction. If the above precautions cannot be followed, the hot work operations shall not be performed. Welding in confined spaces. Where welding operations require entry into a confined space, the following special provisions shall be enacted in addition to all requirements of the confined space entry program. When welding or cutting is being performed in a confined space, the gas cylinders and welding machines shall be left on the outside. If oxyacetylene work is to be suspended for a period longer than 15 minutes, all torches and cylinders shall be shut off and hoses removed from the confined space. Welders shall be protected from falling in accordance with the Unison Solutions Fall Protection Plan. Personal protective equipment, PPE, including clothing and eye and face protection, shall be used at all times in accordance with the company PPE program. Ventilation is a prerequisite to work in confined spaces. Such ventilation shall be at minimum rate of 2,000 cubic feet per minute per welder in the confined space. In circumstances where it is impossible to provide such ventilation, approved airline respirator, see respirator section, hose mask with blowers, or self-contained breathing equipment shall be used. The requirements for exhaust ventilation in other than confined space area will depend upon the individual circumstances. In areas with a ceiling height less than 16 feet or welding in small rooms or behind screens, the supervisor or another qualified individual must evaluate the hazards and take immediate action to ensure adequate ventilation is provided. Fumes emitted from flukes, coatings, filler materials, zinc, brass, bronze, and galvanized materials may be extremely hazardous if inhaled. The physical conditions must be evaluated by the project competent person, and the type of ventilation or PPE required must be determined. Hot work with special metals. Welding, cutting, or heating in any enclosed space involving any of the following shall be performed with local exhaust ventilation or through the use of respiratory protection. Zinc-bearing materials or metals, lead-based metals, cadmium-bearing filler materials, chromium-bearing metals or coated materials, stainless steel. Welding, cutting, or heating in any enclosed space involving any of the following shall be performed with local exhaust ventilation and the use of respiratory protection. Metals containing lead other than the impurity or coated with lead-bearing materials. Cadmium-bearing or cadmium-coated base metals, chromium-bearing metals or coated materials, metals coated with mercury-bearing materials, beryllium-containing base or filler materials. Employees performing these operations in an open air shall be protected by approved respiratory protection. Oxygen, fuel, welding, and cutting. All employees designated by Plaas Incorporated to work with oxygen or fuel gas supply equipment shall be trained and qualified to operate such equipment. The following subjects are of particular concern and shall be reviewed with applicable personnel. Before a regulator to a cylinder valve is connected, the valve shall be opened slightly and closed immediately. The person cracking the valve shall stand to one side of the outlet, not in front of it. The cylinder valve shall always be opened slowly to prevent damage to the regulator. When a special wrench is required, it shall be left in a position of the stem of the valve while the cylinder is in use so that the fuel gas flow can be shut off quickly in case of an emergency. In the case of manifold or coupled cylinders, at least one such wrench shall always be available for immediate use. Fuel gas should not be used from cylinders through torches or other devices which are equipped with shut-off valves without reducing the pressure through a suitable regulator attached to the cylinder valve or manifold. Before a regulator is removed from a cylinder valve, the cylinder valve should always be closed and the gas released from the regulator. Leaking cylinders shall be tagged and removed from the job site at once. If a regulator attached to a cylinder valve will effectively stop a leak through the valve seat, the cylinder need not be removed from the work area. Compressed gas cylinders shall not be used without a pressure-reducing regulator attached to the cylinder valve, except when connected to a manifold system. Danger no smoking sign shall be posted in rooms where fuel gas is stored or used. Oxygen cylinders in storage shall be separated from fuel gas cylinders or other combustible materials, especially oil or grease. A minimum distance of 20 feet, 6.1 meters. If conditions require a non-combustible barrier at least 5 feet, 1.5 meters high, having a fire resistance rating of at least 1/2 hour may be used instead. Valve protection caps should always be in place and secured. When cylinders are hoisted, they shall be secured on a cradle, slingboard, or pallet. They shall not be hoisted or transported by means of magnets or choker slings. Cylinders shall be moved by tilting or rolling them on the bottom edges. They shall not be intentionally dropped, struck, or permitted to strike each other violently. When cylinders are transported by power vehicles, They should be secured in a vertical position in a special carrier intended for that purpose, or with regulators removed and the caps installed. Inside a building, cylinders shall be stored in a well-protected, well-ventilated, dry location, at least 20 feet (6.1 meters) from highly combustible materials. Cylinders shall be kept far enough away from the actual welding or cutting operation, so that sparks, hot slag, or flames will not reach them. When this is impractical, fire-resistant shields shall be provided. Cylinders shall be placed where they cannot become part of an electrical circuit. Fuel gas cylinders shall be placed with valve end up whenever they are in use. No damaged or defective cylinders shall be used. Fuel gas and oxygen manifolds. Fuel gas and oxygen manifolds will have the name of the substance they contain in letters at least 1 inch high, which will be either painted on the manifold or on a sign permanently attached to it. Manifold hose connection should be such that the hose cannot be interchanged between fuel gas and oxygen manifolds and supply header connections. When not in use, manifold and header hose connections must be capped. Hose. Fuel gas hose and oxygen hose shall be easily distinguishable from each other. Oxygen and fuel gas are not to be interchangeable. When parallel sections of oxygen and fuel gas hose are taped together, not more than 4 inches out of the 12 inches should be covered by tape. All hose in use carrying acetylene, oxygen, natural or manufactured fuel gas, or any other gas substance which may ignite, enter into combustion, or be in any way harmful to employees, will be inspected at the beginning of each working shift. Bada bang, bada boom.